Hello, everybody. My name is Tom Innes, and I am the managing editor of Voice Magazine. I'm the one that's been here now for like 12 years, but I have the great pleasure of introducing new Tom Beasley, who is the new editor of Voice Magazine, to you all this evening. And yeah, I'm going to talk to him about his past, his career to date, and what he hopes to achieve in the future. So, Tom, thank you very much. Thank you very much for hosting this session. It's great, and it's wonderful to get the opportunity to join you this evening. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I mean you full named me as New Tom, which I'll take. I'll take it. I've been called worse. I've been called worse. So yes, as Tom said, I am Tom Beasley, the new editor of Voice Magazine. I have been a journalist now for a decade. I think I can say that now. Make myself sound very old. But sadly, it's the truth. I've been a journalist in the arts and culture space specifically now for 7 years, predominantly in the world of film and television, although I have dabbled in theatre and books and that sort of stuff. Anything that someone will pay me to write about, essentially. Such is the mercenary life of the freelance journalist, as anyone who has dipped even a toe into this space will be able to tell you. But yeah, I'm very excited to be a part of Voice. I have been here since August and I'm enjoying it immensely so far. I'm enjoying it less when I have to work out how an Instagram Live works for the first time in my life. And it makes me look as old as I feel. So that's, maybe this is brilliant. Maybe everyone's going, what are they talking about? This is exactly how Instagram Live's supposed to go. We'll go with that. But yes, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me to host a chat with myself. I'm looking forward to it and getting into all manner of exciting things.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a great list of questions here, so we'll just sort of ride it out and see how far we get through the list before everybody drops off, myself included. And we can blame your predecessor for using Instagram. Apparently, that's where all the young people are nowadays, and she understood it much better than
Yeah,
at least
I
me.
don't dispute that, but I'm not young enough to be a part of that cohort. You know what? I might be biologically young enough, but I'm not spiritually young enough.
No. I reinstalled Instagram specifically for this, and I'll be taking it back off when we're done here. So, Tom, would you please cast your mind back 10 years ago, a whole decade ago, certainly more than half the lifespan of some of the people that we work with, and think about how you first got into journalism? What drew you to this industry?
Well, I suppose the story actually goes even further back than that, because my first published piece in a print magazine was in the year 2009. So we're talking 15 years ago, in fact. Um, I'm not, you know what? I'm not actually sure what initially drove me into journalism. I think I liked studying English at school. I liked creative writing. And I think it seemed like the only career that would allow me to do creative writing in a sort of meaningful way on a day-to-day basis. So from a kind of quite young age, certainly from my early teens, journalism was what I wanted to do. And then I had to do work experience in year 10. And so I had to then reach out to various places to try and get a placement. And I was very keen on doing a journalism placement. So I reached out to all of my local newspapers. There were a lot more of them then than there are now. In Coventry, in the West Midlands, where I'm from. And they all reluctantly, from what I could tell, said no. I sat by the phone for a whole day, the landline phone, as it was back then, sat by the landline, calling all of these numbers, and they all said, either they don't do work experience, period, or they don't do it for people who are under 16 for insurance reasons. And so I wasn't able to do work experience at a journalism type outlet. However, my nan directed me to a magazine that came through her door, a free advertising magazine. And she said, maybe you could reach out to them, see if they'll offer you work experience. And they couldn't because they were a very small operation. But they did say that other magazines like them had started doing a sort of youth voice column. And that they would be quite keen to have 14-year-old me, as it was, on board as a columnist. So I wrote my first column in April 2009 as a 14-year-old. And I still write that column to this day. Um,
No way.
yeah, I
Not as a
still do.
young person.
Yeah, yes,
Are you just
whether
like
I can be
changing your
considered
name every
a,
like 5 years?
yeah, I mean, I like to think that if I ever stopped, the people of Coventry would riot in such an extreme way that I'd be forced to pick up my pen again and return to the pages of Your Call magazine. Um, but yeah, so that was kind of the beginning, really, and that was the first time I was published, and I then decided to go to university and study journalism in a more sort of meaningful way. So I ended up at Bournemouth University, where I did a degree in multimedia journalism. At that point, multimedia did not include Instagram Live, um, and so that wasn't something I was trained in
They
12,
let you
13
down.
years ago.
Yeah.
If only. But yeah, so I graduated in 2015, by which point I was already freelancing for some arts and culture places because film journalism was the thing I'd always wanted to do, writing about films, being a film critic specifically. Although we may get to later why that's not necessarily the most viable of career pursuits in itself. Um, so then I graduated in 2015, worked for a local newspaper in Dorset in Weymouth. Um, and then a national news agency doing court reporting and all manner of things like that before moving to London, taking the plunge and becoming a freelance entertainment journalist, which is what I've been doing ever since. And that now includes being editor of this lovely outlet, which we are all subscribed to right now.
That is quite the storied career there, Tom. And there is so much that we could potentially unpick. I'm going to start with the article that you wrote 15 years ago. What was it about?
So the article I wrote 15 years ago was an introduction to the idea of a teenage boy writing a column. And so at the time, it was sort of everyone kind of feared teenagers at that time. It was the hoodie generation and things like that. So it was kind of a sort of parody idea of me being a terrifying 14-year-old boy who was writing terrifying things about all of the hedonistic pursuits of teenagers in 2009. So yeah, that was kind of the core of the first piece. And then the first few were kind of very loose sort of observational things. And then I think the nice thing, hopefully for people who have been reading all of them in Coventry, is that they can see the way I kind of progressed as not just as a writer, but as a person. Because ultimately I've been basically given the remit to write about anything I care about for the last 15 years. So, eventually they'll see all the film related stuff coming in. The time at university when my writing got incredibly political for 3 years, and then where I've gone since then. So yeah, that first piece was very much, I'm a scary 14-year-old boy with a can of cider on a street corner.
Yeah. Did you find it difficult to channel that in a yob?
No, it's always been there. It's always
there, is it? Right. Okay. Yeah, I can definitely see you riding around the streets in some souped up Volkswagen.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. No, definitely from the times I've worked with you, I can see that. So, in your very storied career, you moved to London and then moved back out of London. But like during all of that time, what would you say have been some of your biggest moments in journalism? What are the things that you look back on in like this first chapter of the Tom Beasley career and go highlight for me?
Okay, so when I was at university, so this would have been 2014, Empire magazine, the esteemed film publication, was working with an organization who may or may not still exist called Go Think Big, a careers organization. And they ran it for a few years, a program where they would take some aspiring journalists and they would cover the London Film Festival for Empire magazine. And I was fortunate enough to be accepted to do that one year. So I did a lot of very early commutes from my now wife's university house in Southampton into London each day to go to screenings. And on the final day of the festival, I was on the red carpet for the film Fury, where I came face to face with Mr. Brad Pitt, who I think is still the most famous person I've ever interviewed.
I mean, that's massive.
Yeah. And so that was, I'd probably done you could probably count on your fingers how many interviews I'd done by that time in my career. And there I was with, one of the most famous movie stars in the world. And I, I'm sure if I were to listen back to it now, I would cringe. But at the time, I think I felt I acquitted myself quite well in that scenario. And ultimately being in the sort of film and entertainment space, most of the stories that I remember are, oh gosh, there was a famous person. And so be prepared for a few minutes of name drops. I've already done Brad Pitt. There are more to come. Um, so one of the most amazing things I did was I was lucky enough to be invited to the BAFTAs one year. Um, so yeah, I got to go on the red carpet and then take a seat right up at the very, very, very top of the Royal Albert Hall, far away from all of the famous people. But it was an incredible experience to be at the BAFTAs live. Um, and yeah, I'll always kind of treasure that. And the profile photo I still use for a lot of things is me on the red carpet at the BAFTAs. It doesn't happen very often, so you take it while you can. And then
Yeah,
I think the only
definitely.
other one that I'd want to mention is one of the, during COVID, when a few films were still released, um, and there weren't many upsides to that time, but one of them was the rise of Zoom interviews and people who wouldn't normally do interviews having the time to do interviews. So I was very fortunate at sort of the tail end of that time to interview my filmmaking hero, Steven Spielberg, for his West Side Story remake over Zoom. And the reason I remember it so clearly is partly because it was Steven Spielberg, partly because Jaws is my favorite film of all time, but partly because if I'd moved my camera slightly to one side, he would have had to look at the enormous poster for his movie, which was on the wall to the side of me for the whole time. I remember running around the flat that morning, hiding all of my Jaws merchandise because I couldn't bring myself to interview Steven Spielberg looking like a fanboy in that respect.
I think you should have had all of your Jules merchandise behind you and then just never acknowledge it
Never
at all.
acknowledged it,
Just
yeah.
play it like completely cool and like can be completely blasé. Do you remember that interview at all, or was it just like an adrenaline high?
I mean, to an extent, any interview I've ever done with a famous person has felt like that. Um, I don't tend to remember the moments particularly well, but I do remember that one because he was very generous and very gracious. And I asked him that, it was only a 4 or 5 minute junket slot. Anyone who's done interviews for films and TV will be familiar with that. Um, but I was able to ask the questions I wanted to about West Side Story, and then at the end, I was able to say to him how much Jaws meant to me, and how significant I found him, and so that was a really great moment for me. Um, so yeah, so I remember that moment pretty clearly. Yeah.
It's cute. Um, and sort of going back to your comment about Brad Pitt being the most famous person you've interviewed so far, who is bigger than Brad Pitt?
Is there anyone bigger than Brad Pitt?
You tell
It's a
me.
good question. I mean, beyond Brad Pitt, you're sort of talking about, I don't know. In the film space, I think he's probably as high as I think maybe like a sort of legacy star, like a Tom Hanks, maybe might be higher up the totem pole. But in terms of like pure star wattage, I don't think there's an equivalent to Brad Pitt. The only person who would get close is someone who I have actually also interviewed, because I was lucky enough to do the red carpet for the premiere of Mission Impossible Fallout, and very briefly spoke to Mr. Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I was going to say someone like Tom Cruise would probably be bigger. George Clooney, where would you
I've
put
no, I've
him
not met George Clooney.
in the hierarchy of celebrity, seemingly exclusively white males? Where would you put
Yeah. Yeah,
George
I think
Clooney?
sort of. I think beyond that, you kind of have to look outside the film space to like politicians and presidents and prime ministers and people
Ooh,
like that.
I like the suggestion that politicians have higher star power than like movie stars. I don't know if that's true.
I don't know. I think like Barack Obama
Mm,
would
yeah,
probably
fair
be,
enough.
whereas one of our recent prime ministers, Theresa May or Liz Truss, would not be that high up the totem pole.
Oh man, can you imagine like an exclusive long form interview with like Liz Truss? where she's not heckled by lettuces and
Yeah.
posters. Yeah, fair enough. Although Taylor Swift would like outdo all of them, wouldn't she?
Yes,
I'm
I
just
think
going to
so.
throw her name in there for some SEO reasons, but also like she is genuinely, I think, one of the biggest political and social forces out there at the moment.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think Taylor Swift is arguably the most famous person in the world. Um,
Yeah.
and as a result, she is able to very, very carefully choose who she gives interviews to and when.
So when is she coming on Voice?
Yeah, that's it. She's not doing junket slots for her tour. I would imagine she was conspicuously absent from the marketing for Cats, for example.
I could talk at length about cats. That is like my little bit of an obsession, and I've not even actually watched the film. I live exclusively in all of the chatter around cats without actually ever watching it, and I'm never going to watch it. But I'm not going to. I'm gonna keep us on track because we're 20 minutes in and two questions in. Um, again, 15 years, long time in the industry. A lot changes in that time. And I would say in the last 2 or 3 years, we have seen such a radical seismic shift in how the media industry works. A big change from that sort of slow structural decline that we've existed in for the last 10 years. What do you personally find particularly challenging about the industry? And you can talk about the obvious or perhaps the little minutiae that perhaps aren't as apparent to people.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time and a really difficult time. So, for like obviously the big backdrop of the last probably decade is outlets trying to work out how to get people to pay for journalism online. And, since the first paywall was introduced however many years ago, we've seen various kind of models for it, different types of subscription, donation models, things like that. But that's kind of the broad challenge. And if you're a journalist looking to be paid for it, you have to kind of hope that someone comes up with a solution. And there are some media brands that are doing very well. What's interesting, I guess, is that obviously you talked about kind of structural decline, and we've obviously seen that with traditional print publications, newspapers closing, magazines closing. I mean, we've just lost Total Film in the last 6 months, one of the biggest entertainment publications, certainly in the UK, if not the planet. So, it's a really difficult time for print publications. But what we're now seeing is the websites that the print publications pivoted to also struggling. Like now, news websites and journalistic websites are struggling as well. And you find a lot of that is now at the whims of big tech companies. So for a long time, it was social media, and it was how to promote your work on social media. It was lots of publishers becoming very reliant on traffic from Facebook. We then know what happened with Zuckerberg and pivots to video, and how all of that played out, and how that was disastrous for a lot of people in the journalism industry. Lots
We
of people
lied, is what you mean, about the promises of video bringing new audiences and new revenue streams to
yeah,
publications. Yeah.
yeah, and ultimately, lots of people lost their jobs, and lots of people whose primary product they created was the written word, found the written word completely devalued. And many of them were innovative enough to change skill and to work in the video space, only to then find that that was another industry built on sand, essentially, that was going to just dissolve. And we're seeing that again now with search engines, because we're now seeing traffic built on Google results and search engine optimization. But ultimately, Google's a massive tech company, and they can just wake up tomorrow morning and move the goalposts. And you could be brilliant at scoring the goals when they're in one place, but if the goalposts then move to the other side of the world, then you find it much harder to score. And that, again, we're losing jobs, we're losing skills. In the freelance space, a lot of colleagues and peers who I know to be fantastic journalists either have left the profession or are thinking of leaving the profession, because even in the last 12 months, freelancing has become much more difficult than it was. It's still doable. It's still a viable career path, but you have to be innovative and you have to be imaginative and you have to be so much more determined, I guess, than you used to have to be. Like when I first came into journalism, I remember having conversations with, old hands who'd been in the industry in the 80s who were like, yeah, it used to be easy. I used to get paid X thousand pounds for every magazine piece. I used to, get flown around the world on expenses. And even they now can't, they're struggling to make ends meet. So it's doable still, but you have to be so innovative and so reactive.
Yeah. So you touched on pathways into the journalism industry, which is my next question. But before that, I just wanted to talk briefly about Google moving the goalposts, because I think that is such an important and somewhat underappreciated conversation within some circles at the moment. It is gathering steam in that, like, you talk about how these goalposts are moving and how it's harder to generate traffic, but we are seeing search engines actually basically steal content. The written word is now so undervalued that they don't even bother sending people to websites. They just automatically generate snippets of text into search engines. And we can get into a huge conversation about AI, but very quickly, like, what are your views on the increased use of artificial intelligence or generative AI in, in search, but then also in journalism more generally?
Yeah, absolutely. So in search, I think, so as you said there, we had for a long time search engines generating snippets. And at least those snippets were taken from things journalists had written. They were, and as a journalist, you could have SEO methods that would essentially point the robot to the correct bit to pull out as the snippet. And it certainly robbed a lot of places of clicks because ultimately Google's saying, here's the information, you don't need to click for it now. But now what we're seeing with AI additions to search is it's not involving a journalist at all. It's essentially Google tracing the entire internet and regurgitating it back to you. And as anyone who has spent any time on the internet will tell you, there's a lot of nonsense on the internet. And without human intervention, a lot of nonsense is going to end up in search results. A lot of the times you Google something and it's borderline unusable because, you have to scroll so far to get to an actual person actually writing about something. And one of the things Google tells journalists it wants is for them to showcase expertise and showcase personal experience in what they write, which is great. And people are doing that, but they're then finding it buried under an AI wodge of text that is not based on anyone's expertise, is based on a machine reading something, and a machine that is still very, very prone to failure. We all saw the case studies when the Google AI stuff first launched of them telling them to put bits of metal on pizzas and stuff like that.
Glue. Yeah.
Glue, exactly, yeah. But that's what Google AI was doing, because Google AI was reading Reddit threads from people messing around.
The best place and the worst place to get any information. Yeah,
exactly. And they were taking it at face value because Reddit's an interesting one, because a lot of what's on Reddit is really useful, but that's probably 15% of it. And then the other 85% is people putting glue on pizzas.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, I fear AI in search. I fear AI in writing massively. Not because it could ever replace human beings, because it can't. Certainly not at the current moment. I don't know where we'll be in, when Skynet takes over or whatever. But I need to be nice to the machines just in case. But what AI can do is produce a sort of okay facsimile to just deliver data to you. And so if there are certain kinds of sort of service journalism which are very valid and which employ a lot of people that might disappear if generative AI continues to move forward at the rate it's at. And I worry about the art sector and how willingly the door is being opened by a lot of people, often under the guise of, well, we're just experimenting with it. And of course we'll always protect creatives, but we need to experiment with this new thing. And no, you don't. Like, send a message that your creatives are the most important people and that they can't be replaced by the machines. So we need to protect them. So I worry about any outlets, publications, companies that are willingly opening the door to AI because that genie can't go back in the bottle afterwards.
No, 100%. 100%. And all of these people that say they're experimenting with it, they're typically not the creatives.
No.
It's the budget setters, it's the CEOs, it's all of the decision makers basically who are looking for profit maximization,
Yeah.
almost exclusively at the cost of creativity. So, with that positive picture painted, how do you view the current state of pathways into the journalism industry?
Um, so I think this plays into something to a lot of the work I've recently been doing with voice. Because we've just run a series called Kick Some Class about access into the arts for working class people. And, you know, across all sectors, it's incredibly difficult for working class people to get into the arts. And specific to journalism, the reason for that is you cannot leave university or leave school and walk straight into a staff job where you're being paid a salary to write for a newspaper, a website, a magazine, whatever. That pathway simply does not exist. However, the pathways that do exist are opened by networking. So if you have family members, friends, contemporaries, peers in the industry, they can open doors for you and they can provide you with contacts and information you need. Finance is an enormous barrier because when you're first starting out, and to be honest, even when you've been doing it a while, journalism doesn't pay very well, especially journalism in fields like entertainment and sport, because those are things people enjoy writing about. And the idea is if you enjoy it, we don't have to pay you as much because you know it's sort of baked in, but you can't pay your rent with enjoyment. And so ultimately you're kind of stuck there. And ultimately as well, it's difficult to get any piece placed in any publication unless you've got a portfolio to point to. And that's the brilliant thing about what we offer at Voice is we offer people the chance to build that portfolio. But unfortunately, there are less scrupulous outlets out there that will essentially exploit the labor of people who are just starting out in the industry, and you know, say, well, you need to produce X amount of articles for us. You need to produce 10 articles a day on Marvel, and we're not going to pay you for any of it. But you get your name on this amazing website that will give you great exposure and things like that. And you know, there are some people in my industry who think that you should never write for free. And the only people who say that are people who are already in the industry. No one who is outside the industry will ever say that because you do have to write for free. And you can choose when and how much you do that, but you do have to write for free. I had to write for free. I had to write that magazine column I've never taken a penny for in 15 years. I wrote for a lot of websites as I was coming up through university, for which I didn't take a penny. I wrote for university magazines. I was editor of a university newspaper. All of that, obviously, I never took a penny for because the pennies weren't available to take. The problem then becomes, and this is what the other people I mentioned are getting at, how do you then get out of the paying for free once you've done it? Because the argument then is, well, if you've done it for free, you've devalued your labor, and it then becomes difficult to then demand money for something you've previously been offering for free. And that is where the trickiness comes in. And also that writing for free is not something you can do if you need to pay your rent. So, like, unless you've got a support structure in place, it's very difficult to get into the industry. But the fortunate thing is there are places out there that will give you the skills you need, that will provide you with exposure without exploiting your labor, that will provide access to paid opportunities, that will take a chance on new writers. I want to single out Simon Brew, who is a Birmingham-based journalist. He has a magazine called Film Stories, and the ethos of that is everyone gets paid for their work, and he will publish a certain number of previously unpublished writers in every issue. So there will be 2 or 3 people in every issue who are being paid for their writing for the first time. And people like that and publications like that are so important because they are the people who are providing that bridge. And you know, on the support structure thing, I wouldn't be in this industry and where I am now without the support structure of my wife, who has been with me the whole time I've been doing this, and works as a nurse, so has always had a consistent income. And when we first moved to London, I first became a freelancer. For the first, at least the first year, if not the first 18 months, I earned very little, less than I would have earned if I'd been working at a bar or in a shop. Um, and because of her patience and her, willingness to do the job she did, that allowed me to build myself up to the point where I was making enough money to contribute and to earn a full-time salary.
Yeah. But how, and I like this is a massive question, I know, but how do we solve that issue in a way that then stops the perpetuation of only certain types of people being able to go into the industry? So you talk about those support structures in place. Now, that is essentially, unless I'm putting words in your mouth, shorthand for people of a certain class or people who are in a fortunate position to have somebody who can take the financial hit for them. Um, there are so many people who do not have those support structures and do not have the finances or the family who can then that enables them to enter the industry. So, is there any way of opening the pathways up for more young people from different diverse backgrounds?
Well, that's my hope for what Voice offers and for what publications like Film Stories that I've mentioned and others like it who are willing to take a chance on those voices, especially on diverse voices. And there are lots of incredible online publications who specifically focus on people of color, on women, on people from the LGBTQ plus community, on spotlighting those voices. The problem is they're often not able to pay because the money just isn't there. Um, but they do provide a platform for people to create a portfolio, and then it comes down to people like Film Stories magazine who will provide that bridge into being paid for stuff. And ultimately, once you've created a portfolio in whatever way you have, there's no reason you shouldn't be pitching the legacy media companies that still have money. However much money they do have, all of them have had budget cuts over the last years. But I the almost the first publication I started pitching after I became freelance was The Guardian, and it took a good few months of pitching various ideas before I ever got commissioned by them. And in the end, I probably wrote maybe a dozen pieces for The Guardian, which was great because they were my dream outlet. Essentially, they were who I always wanted to write for. And so there's no reason you can't be pitching those places. But obviously, I'm very aware that I was fortunate enough to have my wife earning a full-time wage, and we were able to live quite frugally. We lived very tightly for that first year, 18 months. It wasn't until I managed to get a regular, consistent client, hat tip to Yahoo Entertainment and my delightful editor there, Tom Butler, who I'm exceptionally thankful to, because the work he gave me essentially got us through the pandemic. And so I'm amazingly thankful to him. And again, the same thing when so last year I worked for a publication for 10 months. I got a staff job. I left the freelance world. That publication unfortunately closed in December of last year, and it was Tom at Yahoo who was again able to throw me some work to keep me going through those times. So, but what I will say is the way I got that work for Yahoo was because he put out a tweet saying, "Is there anyone out there who would like to do entertainment work for Yahoo? If you've got your NCTJ qualifications." So that's National Council for the Training of Journalists, for those who are not aware. And that is things like media law, shorthand, various things within that, court reporting, various skills that give you a diploma. And so it was entirely by keeping my nose to the ground on social media, which is obviously not to ladle on another challenge, but that is now much harder given how disparate social media platforms have become. It used to be Twitter and LinkedIn were the two you needed to be on for journalism jobs, and Twitter is now, for various reasons, a no-go. And and so you're kind of left with LinkedIn. And are any of us really good at using LinkedIn if we put our hands to our hearts?
I mean, what does it mean to be good at LinkedIn? Is
Well,
it something you
exactly,
want to be good at? To be
exactly.
honest? Yeah.
So
My
I
other
suppose.
job is going to go mad if I rally
Look,
on LinkedIn.
I realize I've just started talking about challenges again. So I suppose to kind of bring it back to the more positive side, it's about finding those people who are taking a chance, who do have a little bit of money or are doing things in the right way. Um, and unfortunately, it just involves an enormous amount of hard work and quite a large slice of luck along with it to get into a viable position. Like, I'm not going to say that I'm where I am entirely because of skill and because of determination. Obviously, I would like to think quite a lot of both of those things, but also right place, right time, right person, right time is hugely important.
That's just that is just the truth of so many different industries and so many different jobs, though, isn't it? But as you said, a lot of what you have achieved is because of your own tenacity and your own perseverance. As you said, you've been writing a blog or like writing a column, sorry, for 15 years unpaid. That's dedication to the craft, right?
Yeah, and along with that, I've always, certainly before I went freelance, I was always a blogger. So I used to go and see pretty much every film I could and write a review of it for a personal blog that obviously wasn't making any money. So by the time I became a freelance film writer, I had probably written 1,500, 2,000 film reviews. Um,
Okay.
like without taking a penny because I was just writing for my own personal blog. And so I'd got the reps in. I think is fair to say.
Y- yes, no, definitely that 10,000 hour
Yeah,
um
exactly. Yeah,
quote
exactly.
definitely
Exactly.
applies there. What were you blogging on? LiveJournal, WordPress? Was it
Oh, WordPress. Yeah, WordPress.
classic? So, shall we talk about voice?
Okay, let's do that.
The reason we're all here. So, as you mentioned earlier, you have been the editor of Voice since the start of August. Could you first just tell everybody why is it that you wanted to become the editor of our publication?
Um, the main reason, and this sounds cheesy, but it's true, is because I wish voice had been around when I was younger. I would have absolutely leapt at the chance to have been part of something like Voice when I was younger. It's an amazing platform that exists to allow people to write and create about the arts, which is exactly what I wanted to do. And so I was so thrilled to learn that it existed. And I'm at a point in my career where I've moved out of London, I've bought a house, and I kind of want to give back in a way if I can. So I've always been involved in sort of mentoring type projects at my former university, and places like that. But I wanted to kind of formalize that and to be able to give back and to share whatever expertise I do have with the next generation, because ultimately they're the people who are going to have to make sense of the journalistic landscape as it is now. And hopefully I've got something I can teach them. And that's something I've always been very keen on. To borrow a phraseology we used in Kixum class, on holding the ladder for the next generation of people, because there are people who will, in every profession and every walk of life, who will get to the top and then kick that ladder away to make sure that no one else can get there. And there is some of that in journalism. There's certainly some of that in journalism, but I'm very keen on doing what I can to hold the ladder down and provide whatever support I can to the next generation of people who are far more energetic and far more creative and far more, I guess, suited to the new landscape than
Far more capable of using Instagram.
exactly.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be 45 minutes into an Instagram live and still slightly unsure whether they're doing it right.
I mean, I still can't see you on so I have
That's just as well because
absolutely no idea.
I've been making some hideously abusive gestures towards you.
Yeah, that's all right. I'm keeping an eye on you on Zoom, so don't worry too much. I will be providing detailed feedback once this is over. But yeah, I mean, you've really picked up on what voice is about and the importance in my mind, of the publication, which is all about holding that ladder. Like we've never used that phrase before, but when you presented this theme, like the theme of Kicks and Class to us, that whole concept of holding the ladder just resonated so exceptionally clearly because it is exactly what we want to do. It like I think regardless of industry, it is exceptionally difficult to get into anything nowadays because you basically have to have had 5 years experience to start a early careers job. And where do you get that experience now? How do you actually afford that experience? You have to network, you have to make those connections and those contacts. But again, how do you do that with social media so disparate now? Unless you want to become one of those LinkedIn loonies, there's just no way to build that portfolio and to build that network of people. So you do need people who are already entrenched in the industry, like veterans,
Yeah.
to lend the hand and pull people up. I think that is truly vital. So you've been here for 3 months now, your first quarter. How are you finding it, or what have you been up to?
So yeah, I'm loving it. It's absolutely fantastic. Obviously we came straight out of the blocks with Kick Some Class, which, to give a bit of background, was a series where I interviewed, I think it was 12 in the end, 12 different people, some of whom were working class creators who I deemed to have sort of broken the class ceiling, was the phrase we used, and achieved success from various backgrounds. So we spoke to Claudia Jesse, who people will know as one of the stars of Bridgerton. She grew up on a council estate and was able to get into the world of acting. I spoke to Robert Muchamore, who's the author of the Cherub series of young adult books. And he grew up in London and in a working class background and is now a very successful young adult author. And then the other side of the interviews were people who are doing the sorts of things we've already talked about, people who are holding the ladder and are trying their best to enable pathways into the arts for working class folks. And it was all kind of driven really by my own kind of experience of my own sort of class identity. So I grew up in Coventry, and I never particularly saw myself as like, I don't know, working class, I guess. Like, it wasn't until Theresa May coined the term jam, just about managing, that I found like there was a way to describe, because like we were never comfortable, but we were never like struggling, is what I would say. And so I didn't kind of feel massively working class or whatever until I went to university and I met all of these people who were going to get into the world of journalism. And, you know, I've made this comment lots of times in lots of different bits of writing, but I felt like Dick Van Dyke, like a chimney sweep when I was in this world. And I was like, oh, actually, no, there is a thing here. And then as I got into the profession and saw all of the structures we've already talked about, you know, I went, oh, there's something going on here. Particularly, and something I'm very passionate about, and another of the reasons I was so interested in voice, is because everything is so centralized around London.
Yes.
And you know, voice being based, obviously a national organization, but based in the Midlands, that was really important to me because obviously I'm from the Midlands and I now live there again. And there was no access to journalism and to not even really to the arts in my neck of the woods. And so kind of very keen to support that. So that was kind of the ethos behind Kick Some Class. Our next project, which we're just moving on to, is about the climate crisis and about the sort of situation we're in, where I would say that for the majority of sane people, I think that's the best way of putting it, the science of the climate crisis is settled, kind of. We know there's an enormous problem, we know it's our fault, and we know we're going to have to solve it. That's kind of where we're at. The next thing is how to get people engaged and get people doing things. And so this next series will focus on the people who are using the arts and the creative industries to do that. So that's kind of the next series. I'm also working with the Voice Contributor Program, which is a small group of budding journalists who I am doing workshops with, encouraging them to create pieces of work, passing on whatever journalism expertise I've got, and hoping to kind of get them to a position where they might be able to consider making those steps we've discussed and getting a career in journalism. So I'm really loving working with that group. They are all fantastic, and I hope they continue to do well.
I must say, I did write down when you were talking about that point in your career, and you're just like, I've moved out of London. I'm at that point in my career now where I've moved out of London, as though you've graduated outside of the city and you feel
Right. No,
comfortable
but
enough to
that's
make that
actually
move.
that's actually a really important point because I've often said to people, it's really difficult, especially to do an arts journalism job if you're not in London, and particularly film, because even now, one of the things I struggle with now is getting at, because if you're going to write about film journalistically, you've usually got to see it before it's released to the general public. Um, and with only a few minor exceptions, all of those preview screenings are in London. So even now, this Saturday, for example, I'm getting a train at 6:55 a.m. to go into central London from Coventry to watch Paddington in Peru.
It's going to be worth it though, right?
Absolutely going to be worth it. So Paddington 2 is I was invited 2 years ago to take part in the Sight and Sound magazine poll of film critics to decide the greatest film ever. So they asked lots of critics to submit their 10 favorite films ever. Paddington 2 was on my list of 10. So that's how significant Paddington is to me.
That's an eclectic list when you've already said that Jaws was your favorite film of all time.
Yes.
You've got Jaws on there and Paddington 2.
Yeah, there won't be many lists that have Jaws, Paddington 2, Singing in the Rain, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on them.
No, I doubt there will be. I truly doubt there will be. I'm going to make you write that whole 10 out at some point, and we'll talk about it in more detail. But to keep things on track, the Voice Contributor Program obviously embodies basically everything that we've spoken about in terms of holding that ladder and trying to elevate the next group of creatives and journalists. And that is part of our Creative Pathways program, again, tying everything back to that concept of pathways and trying to get people from that first rung to the next one. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you are doing with the voice contributors, though? I have essentially empowered you to fully make it your own and really focus on the journalistic elements of your experience. But what are you working with them to do?
Yeah, so I'm running a series of workshops, each of which focuses on a different type of journalism, I guess. So we've talked about blogs and opinion writing. We've talked about reviews. We have a session coming up about interviewing, feature writing, that sort of stuff. And in those sessions, I guess what I'm doing is going through the kind of basic structures of how those particular types of journalism work. Providing examples of them, some of which are from my own experience, some of which are from external sources, and hoping to kind of use those strategies, those structures to help them improve the already brilliant ideas that they've got, because they already have the ideas. So that's not a problem. I don't have to teach them how to be creative. They are already very creative. And that's the fantastic thing. And the rewarding thing, even, I've only been... we're just coming to the end of the first month of it. And the really rewarding thing is seeing the techniques and the strategies that I've told them about now be implemented in their work. And the work that they're producing is fantastic. And you can see it all on Voice if you head over there now. You can see the brilliant stuff they're doing. And, some of that brilliant stuff has fed into the work I'm doing with Kicks and Class. Some of it is them very much going their own way. And my goal is to provide them with information and expertise, but then let them shape things creatively, because ultimately they've got so many ideas. I don't want to be prescriptive and say this is what you can and can't do. They've got great ideas, so I want to give them the skills to get those great ideas into a format that people can experience them and enjoy them, because that's what we all want to do. And the result, hopefully, will be them feeling more empowered and them feeling like they have the skills to get the ideas out of their head and onto paper, which is the hardest part of it. I say onto paper, onto a page of code.
Yes, 100%. And again, it's always, I don't work directly with young people as much anymore, but it was always my favorite part, was just to see how energetic and how creative they were. And I always viewed it as a privilege to be able to help them refine the ideas they had rather than having to um, teach them how to have ideas. Like, I think there's always a misconception that young people don't know how to do something or they like lack the skills to be able to articulate their ideas. And I don't think that's true. I think they lack the platform and the confidence to be able to articulate their ideas. And it is ultimately our job as voice, but also I think as professionals to allow young people the space to experiment and to find their own tone of voice. So again, what I really enjoy seeing in your work and the work of all of the editors that Voice has had over the years is that it's always been non-destructive and non-critical editing, for instance. So we are there to help them polish. We're there to help them think about the best way of refining their idea and their message to make sure that it is as articulate as possible. But we're never there to put words in their mouth because we don't need to.
No,
Yeah,
that's it. That's the key, is that we don't need to. Like that's the kind of core of it. Often, and like I'm the same, all I need is someone to nod their head and say that's a really good idea. Because in my head it won't be a good idea. It will be a terrible idea. So I sometimes just need someone to say, yes, you're on the right track. And then I can go off and do whatever I can do. But I don't think we should ever underestimate the value of just being told, yes, your ideas are good and valid.
so Tom, if people outside of wanting to harass you with emails, wanted to get involved with what we are doing on Voice, how are the different ways that people can actively engage with us?
Yes, let's get back to positive things. This is much nicer. So yes, there are loads of ways you can take part in Voice, which is great. And the joy of it, I think, is you can kind of choose your level of involvement. So you can simply sign up as part of our Voice community and you can post on the website. You can discuss whatever things that you would like within reason, and take part and join the conversation. And if that is as involved as you want to be, that is as involved as you can be. If you want to be a little bit more involved, and if you maybe are considering this as a potential career, or you simply want to express yourself through different ways, you can join our Voice Reviewers program, which is a fantastic program that provides you not only with a platform to share reviews, but also provides potential access to opportunities to go and review things, whether it's films, TV shows, lots of theatre, art exhibitions, gigs, all sorts of stuff, whatever you would want to do. We can have a good stab at getting you access to it. Obviously, we're not going to get you to a Taylor Swift concert, or probably not to see the new Star Wars film or something like that. But
nobody's clamoring to see a new Star Wars film anymore, I don't think. And you're going to get Taylor Swift on Voice, aren't you, though? So it doesn't really matter.
Well, exactly. So maybe that's it. Maybe we will get tickets to the next tour. But yes, so you could take part in the Voice Reviewers program, which is and that is open on a rolling basis throughout. And you can be as involved as you want. And then the next thing is the Voice Contributor program, which I run. And that is a more, I guess, journalism-focused approach, providing you with skills that might be useful for a career in journalism. And that is a 3-month program, which is open at various points throughout the year. And it always says on the website whether it's open and what you need to do to apply. And that means you get to spend lots more time listening to my voice as I deliver workshops filled with Simpsons GIFs, and pretend that counts as passing on my expertise.
That how many of the young people that you delivered that presentation to even understood the references that you put in that last slide? This is a really meta offside conversation here, but
The Simpsons is timeless. All of that stuff is good. The one thing that did happen is I included a GIF of the, in my view, iconic moment from Blind Date, in which Cilla Black revealed to the audience that someone who had picked a date on the show was in fact a magazine journalist looking to write a feature. And if you haven't watched it, I would urge anyone listening to this to look it up, because it is one of the most glorious moments of high camp in the history of British television. It is incredible levels of drama and joy. And it's perfect. And I don't care if anyone got the reference, because hopefully they would have Googled it and experienced the joy for themselves.
You're showing your age, I'm afraid. You're showing
Like,
your
it's
age.
fun. Back in
It
the
is fun.
Stone Age when it was on TV.
Back when things were fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Back when we all gathered around the TV on a Saturday night.
That's it. Back when you couldn't watch things on catch up, you had to wait for someone to put a GIF in a presentation 20 years later.
Yeah, if only they knew.
If only.
If only. So to wrap things up, I assume as editor, and this is very much open for question, and you could say, no, I don't want to hear from anybody. But if people did actually want to provide suggestions or give feedback on the work that you and the team are doing, how can people reach out to us?
Yeah, so I mean, if you have a comment or a question about the editorial direction or anything you've written, or wanting to get involved particularly, then you can email me, tomb@voicemag.uk. Hopefully my inbox will be full of lovely things and not people angry about the US election. When I passed on that email address to my aunt, she pointed out that it says tomb.
Okay, great.
Which is quite a sort of grisly email address to be given, which was certainly highlighted when I got an email from someone who was clearly a computer that said "Hi Tomb," and I felt quite aware of my own mortality for a few moments.
I don't think it's ever a bad thing to be aware of your own mortality. It makes every day more important, doesn't it?
I suppose it does. But yes, so if you've forgotten my email address, it's tomb@voicemag.uk.
Okay. So, yep, email tomb@voicemag.uk with any thoughts or feelings, but you can also hit us up on social media. We do have Instagram, we have X, but we are not really using it because we don't want to contribute to the noise there. We're on LinkedIn if you want to give us your latest theories on productivity hacks. And I do believe, actually, Tom, are we not posting on TikTok now as well?
I believe we are.
Okay, cool. Old man shouts at clouds.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's see. That's a Simpsons reference. Timeless. Timeless.
They are. Yeah, sure. And I used to know what it was before they changed it. And yeah. Okay, right. Well, I am feeling that sort of inexorable march towards old age catching up with me now. So I am going to say thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully everybody's learned a little bit about you, and best of luck in cutting this video up into something usable and like tangibly coherent to post on the website, which for those of you watching is voicemag.uk. Yeah, I really look forward to seeing what you do come up with in the months and hopefully years that follow, Tom, because everything that you have produced so far is just exceptional. And all of the young people that get to work with you now are exceptionally lucky.
Oh, well, thank you for well, giving me the opportunity to be part of Voice for starters, and for your kind words and your kind of assistance throughout the first few months of doing this. It's been great to have you there to help guide me through everything that Voice is. Because it's a lot. Voice is a lot of things all at once. That's what makes it so fascinating and I think so incredible and valuable.
We grow to the need of our users.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Great. Well, I'm going to dip out of this and then I will leave you to work out how to end the stream. But thank you again and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for everyone who's watching or has watched.
Bye-bye.